Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to you about a reality that too many people ignore until it's too late, the importance of self-improvement and why the time to begin is now. In the journey of personal development, one principle remains universally true: you cannot change what you do not first understand. This is why self-awareness is the cornerstone of all meaningful transformation. It is the skill, yes, a skill, that allows us to look inward with clarity, honesty, and purpose. Without it, even the most well-intentioned efforts to grow will often fall flat, because they are not built on a truthful understanding of who we are, what drives us, and what holds us back. When people think of change, they often jump to action: new goals, new routines, new environments. But action without insight is rarely sustainable. Consider someone who wants to become more disciplined. They might try waking up at 5 a.m., making detailed schedules, or cutting out distractions, but if they haven't examined the deeper patterns, such as why they procrastinate, what fears they are avoiding, or what internal narratives they believe about themselves, those new habits eventually collapse. Why? Because they were solutions applied to symptoms, not to the root cause. This is where self-awareness comes in. It is the practice of turning the mirror inward, not to criticize, but to observe and understand. It involves asking tough but necessary questions. Why do I react this way in certain situations? What beliefs do I hold that may no longer serve me? What emotional wounds have shaped my behavior patterns? Where am I operating from fear rather than from purpose? These questions are not always comfortable to ask. In fact, one of the reasons people avoid cultivating self-awareness is because it forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've tried to ignore. It challenges the ego, it requires humility, but this discomfort is not harmful, it's healthy. It's the kind of discomfort that leads to growth, clarity, and alignment. Another reason self-awareness is so foundational is that it acts as your internal compass. When you truly know yourself, you become much harder to influence. You are less likely to follow the crowd, chase trends, or make decisions based on fleeting emotions or external validation. Instead, you make choices that are aligned with your values, your long-term goals, and your true identity. This alignment leads to peace of mind, a calm confidence that comes not from perfection, but from authenticity. Self-awareness also empowers emotional intelligence, which is one of the most critical skills in both personal and professional life. When you are aware of your emotions, you are better able to manage them. You can communicate more clearly, respond instead of react, and build stronger relationships. You begin to notice patterns in others as well, what triggers them, what motivates them, and how to navigate conflicts without escalating them. In this way, understanding yourself becomes the foundation for understanding others. It is also important to highlight that self-awareness is not the same as self-judgment. Many people confuse the two and end up being harsh, critical, or paralyzed by guilt when they begin self-reflection. True self-awareness is objective. It's not about labeling yourself as good or bad. It's about observation without attachment, seeing the truth for what it is, so you can begin to make intentional changes. For example, someone might realize they struggle with jealousy. Instead of labeling themselves as a jealous person, they might dig deeper. What insecurity is driving this emotion? What past experiences have shaped this response? What need am I trying to fulfill by comparing myself to others? This line of inquiry turns a moment of weakness into a gateway for growth. That's the power of self-awareness. Moreover, it's worth noting that self-awareness is not a one-time achievement. It's a continuous process. As we grow and evolve, our circumstances change, and so do we. What we understand about ourselves at 20 may be very different from what we realize at 30 or 40. That's why regular reflection, whether through journaling, meditation, therapy, or honest conversations is so important. It keeps you aligned with your current truth, not just your past identity. In today's world where distractions are abundant and noise is constant, developing self-awareness is more challenging and more essential than ever. Social media alone presents a curated reality that can blur the line between who we are and who we think we should be. If you don't take the time to know yourself, you will inevitably be shaped by someone else's narrative. You will adopt goals that aren't yours, live out values that don't resonate, and wake up one day wondering how you ended up in a life that doesn't feel like your own. That's why the most powerful question you can ask yourself is this: who am I becoming, and is that someone I'm proud of? The answer, error in message stream, one of the greatest illusions people fall into, is the belief that there will always be time to change, that personal development can wait until later. This mindset is not only misleading, it's dangerous. The idea that you can postpone working on yourself without consequence creates a silent trap. Days turn into months, and months into years, while unhealthy habits take deeper root and opportunities pass by unnoticed. The cost of delay in self-improvement is rarely immediate, but it is always cumulative. Personal growth doesn't happen on its own. Unlike physical aging, which occurs naturally, becoming mentally, emotionally, or spiritually mature requires conscious effort. And when that effort is avoided, consequences begin to appear gradually, first in subtle ways and later in significant, life-altering patterns. Let's consider a simple example. Imagine someone who avoids learning how to manage their emotions. They may believe it's not a priority or assume they'll naturally figure it out with time, but in reality, unmanaged emotions often lead to poor communication, unresolved conflicts, and damaged relationships. Over the years, these issues may evolve into chronic loneliness, regret over broken bonds, or missed opportunities for meaningful connections, and by the time the person recognizes the pattern, the damage may already be done. This principle extends to every aspect of life. Delayed self-discipline leads to wasted potential. Delayed financial literacy results in debt and stress. Delayed health awareness turns into chronic illness. Delayed confidence can hold someone back from taking life-changing opportunities. The pattern is consistent. What you postpone today will likely cost you tomorrow. One of the primary reasons people delay improving themselves is because the consequences are not instantly visible. If you eat poorly today, you may feel fine. If you ignore a personal flaw today, no one may call you out. If you put off developing a skill, the world doesn't stop spinning. But over time, these small acts of neglect build up. The results show themselves years later in the form of stress, dissatisfaction, or regret. This delayed feedback is deceptive because it gives the illusion that nothing is wrong until it is. A lack of urgency in self-development is often disguised as comfort. People stay in their comfort zones because it's easier to maintain familiar routines, even when they are unproductive. But comfort should never be mistaken for safety. In fact, one of the most unsafe things you can do is refuse to evolve. The world around you is changing constantly. Industries, technology, social dynamics, all of these are shifting. If you're not growing, you're falling behind. There is also a psychological cost to delaying self-improvement. Every time you tell yourself you'll change tomorrow, you erode yourself, rust a little more. You teach your mind that your own promises are negotiable. Over time, this leads to a sense of inner weakness and low confidence. When you stop believing in your ability to follow through, you become mentally passive, waiting for external forces to push you rather than being internally driven. Rebuilding that trust is possible, but it becomes harder the longer you avoid the work. Another major impact of delayed growth is that the window of opportunity often closes quietly. For example, a person might dream of starting a business, pursuing education, or building a meaningful relationship. But because they never work on their procrastination, their fear of failure, or their poor time management, those goals are continually delayed. Eventually, responsibilities pile up, energy declines, and life circumstances shift. What was once a realistic dream becomes a distant memory, not because the dream was impossible, but because the person failed to become the kind of individual capable of achieving it in time. Some of the most successful people in the world did not necessarily start out more talented than others. What set them apart was their early commitment to improvement. They took their flaws seriously. They invested in learning, mindset, and discipline when it was still uncomfortable, and that early investment compounded over time, just like money in a high-interest account. The earlier you begin self-work, the more time your growth has to multiply and elevate your life in ways you can't fully predict yet. It's also important to address a common myth that self-improvement requires massive changes all at once. This belief often becomes an excuse. People think, I don't have time to overhaul my life right now, so they do nothing. But real progress often comes from small, consistent effort. Reading 10 pages a day, journaling for 5 minutes, choosing better conversations, asking for feedback, or simply being honest with yourself once a day. These small habits build momentum, and momentum builds transformation. Ultimately, delaying self-improvement is not a neutral act. It is an active choice to stay the same in a world that demands adaptation. It's a gamble with your future quality of life, and while it may feel easier today, the pain of regret tomorrow is far greater than the discomfort of growth today. So the question becomes not, can I afford to work on myself now, but rather, can I afford not to? The answer for most people is clear once they're willing to be honest. The cost of delay is too high. Time is the one resource you can never get back, and every day you ignore your potential is a day you'll never reclaim. Now is the time to take yourself seriously, not because you're broken, but because you are capable of more. Start with one area of your life, observe it without judgment, decide what the better version of you would do. Then act. No matter how small the step is, that decision, made consistently, is how transformation begins. Before it's too late, the message is simple but powerful. Your life will not improve until you do. The quality of your mindset, your habits, your emotional control, and your personal standards will determine how far you go, far more than luck, circumstances, or even talent. If you avoid the work of self-improvement, you won't stay the same, you'll quietly decline. But if you choose to face yourself honestly and take small, deliberate steps forward, everything begins to change. Self-awareness is where the journey starts. You must know who you are, not who you pretend to be. And once you have that clarity, you must act, because awareness without action is just another form of avoidance. Every day you delay the work, you reinforce the very patterns that limit you, and eventually time runs out. You don't need to be perfect to start, you just need to be willing to examine your life, willing to take responsibility, willing to try, fail, and grow, because the truth is, no one is coming to save you. You are the one who must decide what kind of person you are becoming, so don't wait for a crisis to wake you up. Don't wait for regret to teach you what discipline could have taught you sooner. The best time to fix yourself is before life forces you to. The best time is now. Fix yourself before it's too late.